Richard Hartwell woke up in his big house on Tuesday morning feeling empty inside. He had everything money could buy. His bedroom was bigger than most people's entire homes. His closet was full of expensive suits that cost more than what some people made in a year. Outside his window, he could see his 3 cars parked in the driveway. One was a shiny red sports car. Another was a big black car with a driver. The third was a white car he barely ever used, but Richard felt sad and angry most of the time. He was 52 years old and had worked very hard to become rich. He owned 3 big hotels in the city. He also owned a group of fancy restaurants. Where rich people went to eat, people said he was very successful. Newspapers wrote stories about how smart he was with money. But Richard did not feel happy about any of it. The problem was that Richard did not trust anyone anymore. He thought all people were fake, believed that everyone was nice to him only because he had money. When his workers smiled at him, he thought they were just scared of losing their jobs. When his friends invited him to parties, he thought they only wanted his money. Even his own brother and sister acted strange around him. They were always asking him to help pay for things. Richard sat at his big dining table eating breakfast alone. His cook had made him eggs and bacon, but the food tasted like nothing to him. He looked around his empty house and felt angry. Was tired of not knowing if people were real or fake. He wanted to know the truth about human nature. Were all people selfish? Did anyone do nice things without wanting something back? That morning, Richard made a plan. He decided he would test people. He would dress up like a poor person and see how others treated him. If people were mean to him when they thought he had no money, then he would know the truth. People were only nice when they wanted something. Richard went to his office but could not focus on work all day long. He thought about his plan. He watched his workers and wondered what they really thought about him. His assistant brought him coffee and smiled, but Richard wondered if the smile was real. His manager gave him a report about the restaurants. Richard wondered if the man was telling him the truth or just saying what he wanted to hear. By evening, Richard had made up his mind. He would do the test that very night. He drove to a part of town where poor people lived. He found a small store that sold old clothes. The woman at the store looked at him strangely when he bought torn pants, an old shirt, and a dirty jacket. Aricha told her he was buying clothes for a play. She seemed to believe him. Richard drove home and went to his big bathroom. Looked at himself in the mirror. His hair was always perfect. His skin looked healthy because he ate good food and saw the best doctors. His hands were soft because he never did hard work. He looked like what he was, a rich man. Richard started to change his appearance. First, he put on the old clothes from the store. The pants had holes in them. The shirt was stained and smelled bad. The jacket was too big and had buttons missing. Then he messed up his hair until it looked like he had not washed it in weeks. Richard found some dirt from his garden and rubbed it on his face and hands. He made his fingernails look dirty. Practiced walking with a limp like his leg was hurt. He bent his back a little so he would look older and more tired. When he looked in the mirror again, he was shocked. The rich businessman was gone. Instead, he saw a man who looked like he lived on the streets. Richard practiced talking in a different voice. He made his voice sound weaker and sadder. He thought about what a homeless person would say and how they would act. He had never talked to homeless people before, but he had seen them on the street. Usually he just walked past them quickly. Now Richard needed to choose where to do his test. He did not want to go to any of his own restaurants because someone might recognize him. He also did not want to go to the fancy part of town where he usually ate. Rich people there might call the police if they saw someone who looked homeless. Richard decided to go to the poor part of the city. He had driven through that area before, but he had never stopped there. He remembered seeing small restaurants and shops that looked old and worn out. Those were the places where he could test regular people. Poor people were mean to someone who looked even poorer than them. Then he would know that all humans were selfish. Richard got in his oldest car and drove across town. He felt nervous and excited at the same time. He was about to learn something important about people. As he drove, he saw the buildings get smaller and older. The streets had more holes. There were fewer fancy stores and more small shops with broken signs. Finally, Richard saw a small restaurant called Danny's Diner. The building looked very old. The paint was coming off the walls. The sign outside had some letters that did not light up anymore. But through the windows, Richard could see people inside eating and talking. The place looked clean, even if it was old. Richard parked his car far away so no one would see it, walked slowly toward the restaurant, practicing his limp. His heart was beating fast. He had never done anything like this before. He was used to walking into places and having everyone treat him like he was very important. Now, he was about to walk in looking like someone who had nothing. As Richard got closer to the restaurant, he could smell food cooking. His stomach made a noise, and he realized he was actually hungry. He had been so busy planning his test that he had forgotten to eat dinner. This was perfect. He would go inside and see what happened when a person who looked homeless and hungry asked for food. Richard took a deep breath and opened the door to Danny's diner. The warm air hit his face, and he could hear the sounds of people talking and dishes clinking. This was it. His test was about to begin. He was about to learn the truth about human kindness. Were people naturally good, or were they only nice when they wanted something in return? As Richard walked inside, he felt scared and curious at the same time. He had no idea that this night would change his life forever. He also had no idea that he was about to meet someone who would show him what real kindness looked like. Richard stood inside Danny's diner and looked around. The place was small and old, but it felt warm and friendly. There were about 10 tables with red chairs. The floor was made of old tiles that had been cleaned many times. The walls had pictures of the city from long ago. Everything looked worn out, but it was very clean. A few people were eating dinner. There was an old man drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. A young couple shared a plate of French fries. 2 workers in dirty clothes were eating burgers after their long day. Everyone looked tired but peaceful. Richard felt nervous. These people looked at him when he walked in. Some seemed surprised to see someone who looked homeless. Others looked uncomfortable and turned away. Richard wondered if someone would ask him to leave. In his real life, people always made space for him and treated him like he was very important. Now he felt like he did not belong anywhere. Richard walked slowly to a corner table. His fake limp made him move carefully, sat down in the red chair, and looked around. The table had some scratches on it, but it was clean. There was a small vase with a fake flower. Someone had tried to make this old place look nice. From where he sat, Richard could see into the kitchen. A big man with gray hair was cooking. Wore a white apron and moved quickly between the stove and the counter. Now, the man looked like he had been cooking for many years. The smell of food made Richard's stomach hurt because he was so hungry. Then Richard saw her. A woman came out of the kitchen carrying plates of food. She had dark hair pulled back and wore a blue uniform with a white apron. She looked young, maybe around 30 years old. What caught Richard's attention was her face. She was smiling, but it was not a fake smile like the ones he usually saw. This smile looked real and warm. The woman took food to the old man with the newspaper. She asked him how his day was and listened to his answer. She laughed at something he said. Then she went to the young couple and made sure they had everything they needed. Richard watched her move around the restaurant. She seemed to really care about each person. Soon, the woman walked toward Richard's table. As she got closer, I could see her face better. She had kind eyes and looked tired, like she had been working for a long time. Her shoes were old and worn out. Her uniform was clean, but had been washed many times. Richard could tell she did not have much money. But she still looked neat and professional. The woman stopped at Richard's table and smiled at him. Richard expected to see fear or disgust in her eyes when she looked at his dirty clothes and messy appearance. But instead, she looked at him the same way she had looked at all the other customers. Her eyes were friendly and welcoming. "Good evening," she said in a soft voice. "My name is Maria. I'll be taking care of you tonight." Maria set down a glass of cold water without Richard asking for it, and she placed a small basket with bread rolls on the table. The bread smelled fresh and warm. Richard was surprised. Most places would not give free bread to someone who looked like they had no money. "Thank you," Richard said, trying to make his voice sound weak and grateful. Maria leaned forward a little, like she wanted to help him. "Are you doing okay tonight? You look like you might be cold." Richard was shocked. This woman was actually concerned about him. She was not keeping her distance or looking at him with disgust. She was treating him like a human being who mattered. "I'm just looking for somewhere warm to sit," Richard said quietly. It's cold outside tonight. Maria nodded with understanding. Of course, you can stay here as long as you need to. Do you like something hot to eat? We have good soup tonight. Richard tested her by saying, I don't have any money. He waited to see what would happen. In his experience, this was when people would ask him to leave. But Maria's face did not change. Instead, her eyes became even more kind.
Don't worry about it.
That right now, Maria said gently. Let me get you some soup to warm you up. We can figure out the rest later. Richard could not believe what he was hearing. This woman was willing to give him food even though he had no money to pay for it. He watched Maria walk toward the kitchen. She talked quietly to the big man who was cooking. Richard could not hear what they said, but the cook nodded and started making soup. While Maria was gone, Richard looked around the restaurant again. He noticed that other customers were looking at him. Some whispered to each other. A few seemed uncomfortable that a homeless person was in the restaurant. But when Maria came back, she walked straight to Richard's table like nothing was wrong. Maria brought a big bowl of vegetable soup and a cup of hot coffee. Soup had carrots, potatoes, and beans in it. Steam rose from the bowl, and it smelled wonderful. The coffee was black and strong. This should help warm you up, Maria said as she set the food down. Take your time eating. Richard tasted the soup. It was delicious and made him feel warm inside. As he ate, Maria checked on her other customers, but she also came back to his table several times. She asked if he needed anything else. She brought him more bread when his basket was empty. During a quiet moment, Maria sat down across from Richard. This surprised him even more. She was not afraid to sit with someone who looked homeless. I hope you don't mind me sitting for a minute, Maria said. Our feet are tired. I've been working since early this morning. Richard learned that Maria worked at the diner every day except Sunday. She had been working there for 3 years. She lived nearby with her daughter, who was 7 years old. Her name is Isabella, Maria said, and her whole face lit up when she talked about her daughter. She's the smartest little girl. She loves to draw and wants to be an artist when she grows up. Maria showed Richard a small photo from her wallet. It was a picture of a beautiful little girl with dark hair and big eyes. The photo was worn from being looked at many times. She drew me a picture yesterday, Maria continued. It was a rainbow with all of us under it, me, her, and our cat Whiskers. She said the rainbow means everything will be okay. As Maria talked about her daughter, Richard could see how much she loved the little girl. Her voice was full of pride and happiness. But Richard also noticed that Maria looked very tired. Her hands had small cuts on them, probably from working hard. Her eyes had dark circles under them. Do you work anywhere else? Richard asked. Maria nodded. I clean offices at night after I finish here. It's hard sometimes, but Isabella needs things, and I want to give her a good life. Richard felt ashamed. Here was a woman who worked 2 jobs and was probably very tired, but she was still being kind to a stranger. She was sharing her break time with him and treating him like a friend. Other customers came and went, but Maria never made Richard feel like he had to leave. When people stared at him, Maria would stand between them and Richard's table, protecting him from their looks. She made sure his coffee cup was always full and brought him more soup when he finished the first bowl. As the evening went on, Richard realized something important. Maria was not being kind because she wanted anything from him. She could not possibly know who he really was or what he could do for her. She was being kind simply because it was the right thing to do. She saw another human being who needed help, and she helped him. When it was time for Richard to leave, Maria quietly gave him a small paper bag. Inside were 2 sandwiches wrapped in clean paper, an apple, and a small note written in careful handwriting. The note said, "Everyone deserves kindness. I hope tomorrow is better for you. God bless you." Richard felt tears in his eyes as he read the note. This woman had used her own money to buy him food. Money that she probably needed for her daughter or for rent. But she gave it to him anyway, because she cared about a stranger who had nothing. As Richard walked out of Danny's diner, he felt different than when he had walked in. His test had shown him something he did not expect. Real kindness did exist in the world, and it came from the most unexpected place, a tired waitress who had very little money but had the biggest heart he had ever seen. Richard walked out of Danny's diner holding the paper bag that Maria had given him. The night air was cold, but he felt warm inside. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from what had just happened. For the first time in many years, someone had been truly kind to him without wanting anything back. Richard got into his car and sat there for a long time. He opened the paper bag and looked at the sandwiches Maria had made for him. They were simple sandwiches with ham and cheese, but they were wrapped carefully in clean paper. The apple was shiny and red. The note was written on a small piece of paper in neat handwriting. Richard read the note again. "Everyone deserves kindness. I hope tomorrow is better for you. God bless you." These simple words hit Richard like a punch in the chest. Maria had written this note for someone she thought was homeless and hungry. She had no idea that the man she was helping was rich enough to buy the entire restaurant. She helped him because she believed every person deserved to be treated well. Richard drove home slowly. His big house looked different to him now. It seemed too big and too empty. He went inside and took off his dirty disguise. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. The rich businessman was back, but Richard did not feel the same as before. Richard could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about Maria. He remembered how tired she looked, but she still smiled at everyone. He thought about how other customers had stared at him, but Maria had protected him. He remembered her talking about her daughter Isabella with so much love in her voice. The next morning, Richard could not focus on his work. He sat in his big office, but all he could think about was the small diner and the kind waitress. Assistant brought him papers to sign, but Richard's mind was somewhere else. He kept wondering about Maria and her daughter. What was their life really like? Richard made some phone calls. He had friends who could find out information about anyone. Within a few hours, Richard learned things about Maria that made him feel sad and ashamed. Maria Santos was 28 years old. She was divorced and raising her daughter alone. Her husband had left them when Isabella was 5 years old. But the worst news was about Isabella. The little girl had a serious heart problem. She needed expensive medicine every month to stay healthy. Also needed to see a special heart doctor regularly. These medical bills cost thousands of dollars every month. Richard learned that Maria worked at Danny's diner from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Then she went home to take care of Isabella. After Isabella went to bed, Maria went to clean office buildings from 10 at night until 4 in the morning. She only slept for a few hours each day. Even working 2 jobs, Maria did not make enough. Money, she was 3 months behind on her rent. The landlord had told her she had to pay or move out. Maria had been selling her few belongings to buy Isabella's medicine. She had sold her television, her jewelry, and even some of her clothes. Richard felt sick when he learned all this. Here was a woman who was struggling just to keep her daughter alive and healthy. But she still found money to buy food for a stranger. She still found energy to be kind to everyone she met. She still believed in helping others even when she needed help herself. Richard thought about his own life. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He lived in a house with 20 rooms. He had expensive cars, expensive clothes, and expensive everything. But he had been angry and unhappy for years. He had convinced himself that all people were selfish and fake, but Maria had shown him the truth. Real kindness did exist. How good people were still in the world. They were not easy to find because they were often poor and busy just trying to survive. But they were there, living quiet lives and helping others whenever they could. Richard realized that his test had backfired. He had wanted to prove that people were selfish. Instead, he had found someone who was more generous than anyone he had ever met. Maria had almost nothing, but she gave freely. Richard had everything, but he had become selfish and mean. For the next few days, Richard could not stop thinking about Maria and Isabella. He drove past Danny's diner several times, but did not go inside. He was afraid Maria would recognize him. Somehow, he was also ashamed of what he had done. He had tricked her into helping him when he did not really need help. Richard started watching the diner from across the street. He saw Maria arrive for work early every morning. She always looked tired, but she always smiled when she saw her customers. Richard saw her give free food to other homeless people too. It was not just him. Maria helped anyone who needed it. One evening, Richard saw Maria leave the diner looking very upset. She was crying as she walked to the bus stop. Richard wanted to go to her and ask what was wrong, but he could not. Not a rich businessman who could help her. Richard went home that night and made a decision. He could not keep watching Maria struggle when he had the power to help her. But he also could not tell her the truth about who he was. She might feel embarrassed or angry that he had lied to her. She might think he had made fun of her kindness. Richard decided he would help Maria and Isabella, but he would do it secretly. He would make sure they got the help they needed without them knowing it came from him. It was the least he could do after Maria had shown him what real goodness looked like. That night, Richard started making plans. He had money and connections. He could solve Maria's problems without her ever knowing who helped her. But more importantly, Richard realized that Maria had changed him. She had shown him that being rich meant nothing. If you did not use your money to help others, Richard looked around his empty house and made another decision. He was going to change his whole life. He was going to become the kind of person that Maria already was, someone who helped others and treated everyone with kindness. Maria had given him more than food and kind words. She had given him back his faith in human goodness. The next morning, Richard called his lawyer. Dee had worked too. Richard spent the next week making secret plans to help Maria and Isabella. He worked with his lawyer and several other people to make sure everything would look normal. Did not want Maria to know the help was coming from him. Wanted her to think it was just good luck or a miracle. The first thing Richard did was pay for Isabella's medical care. Found out which doctor Isabella saw and which hospital she went to. Richard's lawyer called the hospital and said an anonymous person wanted to pay all of Isabella's medical bills. The hospital was happy to accept the money. They set up a special account that would pay for all of Isabella's medicine and doctor visits for the rest of her life. But Richard wanted to do more than just pay medical bills. He learned that Isabella's heart condition was serious, but there were new treatments that could help her. The problem was that these treatments were very expensive and not available at the local hospital. Richard arranged for Isabella to see the best heart doctor in the country. This doctor worked at a famous hospital in another city. Richard also paid Maria's rent for the next 2 years. He told his lawyer to make it look like Maria had won a contest. The lawyer called Maria's landlord and said a local charity had chosen. Maria, too, received help with her housing. The landlord was told that the charity would pay Maria's rent directly. Next, Richard worked on getting Maria a better job. He owned 3 hotels and several restaurants. But he could not offer Maria a job directly because she might recognize him. Instead, Richard called a friend who owned a very nice restaurant across town. Richard told his friend about Maria without saying how he knew her. "She's the hardest working person I've ever heard of," Richard told his friend. "She works 2 jobs to take care of her sick daughter. She's honest, kind, and reliable. If you hire her, you'll never find a better employee." Richard's friend agreed. To offer Maria a job as a restaurant manager, the job would pay 3 times more than Maria made at both of her current jobs combined. It also came with health insurance, vacation time, and flexible hours, so Maria could spend more time with Isabella. But Richard was not finished. He wanted to make sure Isabella could follow her dream of becoming an artist. Richard set up a special fund that would pay for Isabella's art classes now and college later. He also arranged for Isabella to get art supplies and lessons from some of the best art teachers in the city. While Richard was making all these arrangements, he kept watching Maria from a distance. He saw how hard she worked every day, saw her smile even when she was tired. He saw her help other people even though she had so many problems of her own. One day, Richard saw Maria at the bus stop after work, crying again. He learned later that Isabella had been sick and needed to go to the hospital. Maria had been scared because she did not have enough money to pay for the hospital visit. But when Maria got to the hospital, she was told that all of Isabella's medical bills had been paid by an anonymous donor. Richard watched from across the street as Maria came out of the hospital holding Isabella's hand. Both of them were smiling. Isabella looked much better, and Maria looked relieved and happy. Richard felt good knowing that he had helped make that happiness possible. A few days later, Maria got a phone call that changed everything. The lawyer called her and told her about Isabella's medical fund. Maria cried when she heard that all of Isabella's medical care would be paid for. She asked who had done this wonderful thing. But the lawyer said the donor wanted to remain anonymous. Then Maria got another phone call. This time, it was about her rent. She was told that a local charity had chosen her to receive help with housing. Maria could not believe it. She asked how the charity had found her. But she was told they helped many struggling families and had heard about her situation. The biggest surprise came when Richard's friend called Maria about the restaurant manager, Job. Maria was confused because she had not applied for any jobs, but the man explained that someone had recommended her very highly. He wanted to meet with her right away. Maria was nervous about the job interview, but she needed work that paid better than the diner. She borrowed a nice dress from a friend and went to meet with the restaurant owner. The interview went very well. The man was impressed with Maria's experience and her attitude. He offered her the job immediately. Maria could not believe how much. The job paid. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of making. The man also told her about the health insurance and vacation time. Maria started crying because she was so happy and grateful. "Why are you giving me this chance?" Maria asked. "I'm just a waitress at a small diner." The restaurant owner smiled. "Someone told me you were special. Said you were the kindest person they had ever met. In this business, we need people who really care about others." Maria accepted the job and gave her notice at Danny's diner. Danny, the old cook, was sad to see her go, but he was happy for her good fortune. All the regular customers were excited about Maria's new opportunities. On Maria's last day at the diner, many customers came to say goodbye. They brought cards and small gifts. Everyone loved Maria and wanted to wish her well. Maria was touched by how many people cared about her. That evening, Maria took Isabella out for dinner to celebrate. They went to a nice restaurant, not fancy, but much nicer than anywhere they had eaten before. Isabella was excited about her mother's new job and the news about her medical care being paid for. "Mama, why are all these good things happening to us?" Isabella asked. Maria thought for a moment. "I think someone up there is watching over us," she said, pointing to the sky. "Or maybe there's a guardian angel somewhere who wanted to help us." Richard, who was sitting at a table across the restaurant, heard Maria's words. He had followed them to the restaurant because he wanted to see them celebrate. Maria's words made him feel warm inside. She thought an angel had helped her. In a way, she was right. Her own kindness had created this miracle. As Richard watched Maria and Isabella laugh and talk over dinner, he realized something important. Helping them had made him happier than anything he had done in years. For the first time since he had become rich, Richard felt like his money had been used for something truly good. But Richard also knew that his work was not finished. He had helped Maria and Isabella, but he had learned something bigger from Maria's kindness. He had learned that the purpose of having money was to help others. Maria had changed his heart, and now Richard wanted to change his whole life. 6 months passed after Maria started her new job and received all the mysterious help. Richard watched from a distance as Maria's life got better and better. Isabella was healthy and happy. She was taking art classes and had already won a prize for one of her drawings. Maria looked rested for the first time since Richard had met her. She was not working 2 jobs anymore, so she had time to spend with her daughter. But the most amazing thing Richard saw was that Maria had not changed. Who she was inside. Even though her life was much easier now, she was still the same kind person. Maria started volunteering at a homeless shelter on weekends. She also began a program at her new restaurant to give free meals to hungry people. Maria often talked about the mysterious person who had helped her family. She told everyone that someday she hoped to meet this person and thank them. She wanted to pay back the kindness by helping others. Maria said she believed that good things happen to people who try to help others. Richard felt proud when he heard Maria say these things. She was using her good fortune to make other people's lives better. This was exactly what Richard had hoped would happen. Maria was not selfish with her new success. She was sharing it with others who needed help. But Richard also felt guilty. He had been keeping a big secret from Maria for 6 months. She deserved to know the truth about who had helped her. Richard was also tired of watching Maria's life from far away. He wanted to be her friend for real, not just a stranger who had helped her secretly. Richard decided it was time to tell Maria the truth, but he was nervous about how she would react. Would she be angry that he had lied to her? Would she be embarrassed that she had helped someone who was really rich? Would she think he had made fun of her kindness? Richard planned carefully how he would tell Maria the truth. He decided to go back to Danny's diner, where they had first met. He would dress like himself this time, not like a homeless person. He would ask Maria to meet him there and then tell her everything. Richard called Maria at her new restaurant. He told her his real name and said he had something important to discuss with her. Maria was confused because she did not recognize the name, but something about the voice sounded familiar. She agreed to meet him at Danny's diner on Sunday evening. Maria arrived at Danny's diner on Sunday feeling curious and nervous. She had not been back to the old restaurant since she left her job there. Danny was happy to see her and gave her a big hug. Maria sat at the same corner table where she had served the homeless man 6 months ago. Richard arrived exactly on time. He was dressed in a nice suit and looked like the successful businessman he was. When Maria saw him, she was confused. This man looked familiar. She could not remember where she had seen him before. Richard sat down across from Maria at the small table. His heart was beating fast. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "I know you don't recognize me, but we have met before?" Maria looked at Richard more carefully. There was something about his eyes and his voice that seemed familiar. "I'm sorry, but I don't remember meeting you," she said politely. Richard took a deep breath. "6 months ago, you served a man who looked homeless at this very table. You gave him soup and coffee, even though he said he had no money. You shared your break time with him. You gave him sandwiches and a kind note when he left." Maria's eyes got wide. She stared at Richard's face and suddenly recognized him. "That was you?" she whispered. "But you look so different. You look like ... like a homeless person," Richard finished. "I was wearing old clothes and had dirt on my face. I was pretending to be poor because I wanted to test people. I wanted to see if anyone would be kind to someone who had nothing." Maria was quiet for a long moment. She looked confused and hurt. "Why did you lie to me?" she asked. "Why did you pretend to need help when you didn't?" Richard felt ashamed. "Because I had become a very unhappy person," he said honestly. "I'm very rich, but I thought all people were fake. I thought everyone was only nice to me because of my money. I wanted to prove that people were selfish, but I proved you wrong," Maria said quietly. "Yes," Richard said. "You proved me completely wrong. You showed me that real kindness still exists in the world. You changed my whole understanding of people." Maria was quiet again, thinking about what Richard had told her. "Are you the person who paid Isabella's medical bills?" she asked. Richard nodded. "Yes, and I arranged your new job and paid your rent. I also set up the fund for Isabella's art education." Maria started crying. But she was not crying because she was sad. She was crying because she was overwhelmed by everything she was learning. "Why did you do all that for us?" she asked. "Because you showed me what it means to be truly rich," Richard said. "You had almost nothing, but you were generous with what little you had. I had everything, but I was selfish and mean. You taught me that having money is only good if you use it to help others." Maria wiped her tears and looked at Richard. "Not angry at you," she said. "I understand why you tested people, but I'm glad you learned that good people do exist." Richard felt relieved that Maria was not angry. "You're not just good," he said. "You're the best person I've ever met. You helped a stranger when you could barely help yourself. You changed my life completely." Maria smiled. "You changed our lives too. Isabella is healthy and happy now. Have a good job and time to spend with my daughter. I can never thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me," Richard said. "You gave me something more valuable than anything I gave you. You gave me back my faith in people." From that day forward, Richard and Maria became true friends. Richard continued to help many other families secretly, just like he had helped Maria. He started programs at his hotels and restaurants to hire people who needed second chances. He gave money to schools and hospitals. He became known as one of the most generous people in the city. Maria continued working at her new restaurant and volunteering to help homeless people. She never forgot what it was like to struggle, so she always tried to help others who were having hard times. They often told Isabella the story of how one act of kindness had changed their whole family's life. Isabella grew up to be a talented artist. just like she had dreamed. Her first art show was about kindness and helping others. One of her paintings showed a homeless man and a waitress sharing a meal. The painting was called "The Night Everything Changed." Richard learned that Maria was right about one thing. Good. Things do happen to people who help others. But more importantly, helping others made Richard feel good about himself for the first time in years. He discovered that the best way to be rich was to share your wealth with people who needed it. Maria had taught Richard the most important lesson of his life. Real wealth is not about how much money you have. Real wealth is about how much kindness you give to others. When you give kindness freely, it always comes back to you in ways you never expected. Years later, when people asked Richard why he had become so generous, he would always tell them about a waitress who had shown him what true kindness looked like. He would say that one small act of compassion had changed not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of other people he had been able to help. And Maria would always tell people that kindness is the most powerful thing in the world. She would say that you never know how one moment of caring for another person might change everything. Sometimes the person you help might be someone who can help many others. But even if they can't, every act of kindness makes the world a little bit better. The story of Richard and Maria spread throughout the city. It reminded people that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. It showed that kindness can come from the most unexpected places and can create miracles in people's lives. Most importantly, it proved that when you give love and kindness to others, it comes back to you many times over. Maria had given Richard hope and faith in humanity. Richard had given Maria and Isabella a chance at a better life. But both of them had received something even more valuable. They had learned that the purpose of life is to help each other and make the world a kinder place.